There is no way around talking about this story without first highlighting the media manipulation of it. And what I mean by that is every headline that has anything to do with the 39-year-old mom who died 4 days after her liver shut down is all to do about the vaccine. You can't find a single headline that suggests it's anything other than vaccine related. And so for that reason, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter have been flagging every post to do with this story, saying, first of all, it's misleading to say that it's related to the vaccine, because in every single one of these stories, no autopsy's been done, no cause of death has been reported. Frankly, I don't know what the cause of death is. I'm not a doctor. I'm not there. I can only guess from my basement. But I would say that it is as likely to be vaccine related as it is acute liver failure, and I'll tell you why. I know, I'm not a doctor. I can't make a prognosis or a diagnosis. I can't say why this happened. Again, I'm just a guy in his basement. But I will tell you that in every single one of these stories, we get the same quotes, the same information. So I'll read it to you from the Epoch Times. This says the 39-year-old mother dies after her second dose of the Moderna vaccine. A 39-year-old healthy single mother from Utah died 4 days after taking a second dose of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine on February 1st. According to local news channel KUTV, her family said that Cassidy Currell, who was a surgical technician for plastic surgeons and I'm sure had some work done herself, had more energy, quote, than most people around her and was a happy person with no health problems. Her father said, quote, "I didn't really cry when my dad died. I cry a lot for her," said her father, Alfred Hawley, a former fighter pilot in the Air Force. Quote, "She was the one who promised to take care of me. She was seemingly healthy as a horse," he told Fox News. "She had no underlying health conditions." So pause right there, and as you're reading this, just remember that this is her father. So you would think he'd probably know about any long-term health conditions that she would have had been open about, or that she had told them about, that she knew about. But there's a possibility that she has some genetic thing that he's not aware of. There's a possibility that she has a health condition that she's not aware of, so he wouldn't be aware of it. Hawley said that Currell started to have symptoms after receiving the shot, the second dose of the Moderna vaccine, experiencing soreness on the shot location, then beginning to feel ill, complaining that she couldn't urinate despite drinking plenty of fluids. She improved slightly the next day, but then her condition worsened. She said she had headaches, felt nauseated, and still couldn't urinate. So the morning of February 4th, Hawley woke up to his daughter's plea for help. She, quote, "She said her heart was racing and she felt like she needed to get to the emergency room. So he took her to the emergency room where she got blood tests. Hawley said she became less coherent and began to throw up. That evening, they transported her to the trauma center. Quote, they did a blood test and immediately came back and said she's very, very sick and her liver's not functioning." Right, she became septic, it sounds like. Doctors attempted to stabilize her for a transplant, but her condition worsened to the point where she could no longer talk by the morning of the next day. So in a day, she goes from the night, "Dad, I gotta go to the emergency room," gets there, nauseated, throwing up, less coherent, then now can't talk, and now the next morning she's completely unstable. They were trying to get her to a point where she was stable enough for a transplant. They just could not get her stable. She got worse and worse throughout that day, and at 9 o'clock she passed. Currell's family is still waiting for an autopsy to determine the cause of death. They set up a GoFundMe page for her and her daughter, for her 9-year-old daughter. The local news, KUTV, led an investigation into COVID-19 vaccine side effects and found 4 deaths were reported by families and caregivers. So that's just in their locality. The CDC told Epoch Times in an email as of March 8th, more than 92 million doses of the vaccine had been administered, with 1,637 deaths occurring following injections. The CDC also states that to date, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System has not detected patterns of cause of death that would indicate a safety problem with the vaccine. Moderna did not respond for comment, and so that's that. They said that there is no pattern of death. Yes, there are deaths that occur after the vaccine, but you also have to remember the news was reporting cause of death COVID when a guy is hit on a motorcycle by a car because he was COVID positive. So someone can get a vaccine, get the second dose of the vaccine, then have their liver shut down, not know why, and die. And we would jump to the conclusion of saying it's a vaccine, except for the fact that there are other underlying conditions that can be the cause. And so you heard this, they said they don't have a cause of death yet, they're waiting on an autopsy, okay? Here's the 9-year-old daughter that the GoFundMe was set up for. She died 30 hours after being admitted to the hospital, and is a very similar story in the New York Post. Although they start out by making sure that you know the vaccine is safe. And here's why it's always in question. Because the Epoch Times tells you in a very obviously slanted way, they believe this is about the vaccine. And then they say, but the CDC doesn't. And so they report that. Then you have the New York Post telling you she was absolutely fine with getting it. In fact, she told all of us, it's fine. You guys should all go get it. That's what her father told this outlet. So it's interesting that her father has this full-on interview with KUTV. And depending on the New York Post or Epoch Times or Fox, they take bits and pieces that will support the narrative they're pushing. And so that's why I'm showing you both. Other than the slant and the kind of the framing of the story, it's really no different. It was the shock of someone who is otherwise completely healthy and happy, having gotten wildly sick after getting the second shot and with nothing else having happened. But they say here, Cural's parents volunteered to donate a portion of their livers. So they were ready to give her a liver transplant, but they just couldn't stabilize her. They never got the chance to offer the life-saving gift when their daughter's liver, kidneys, and heart shut down. Okay? A little more information here than just her liver shut down. They couldn't figure out why. They couldn't stabilize her and she died. Her kidneys then shut down. Then her heart gave out, and then, obviously, if you don't have a beating heart, so she died 30 hours after arriving to the hospital. An autopsy is performed on her body, but the medical examiner's office cannot comment on the case. Okay, so an autopsy's been completed, as of the article being published, and then you have the doctor's statements saying, did the vaccine cause this? I think it would be very hard to demonstrate in an autopsy. The doctor said that he could think of only one instance in which a vaccine could ever be listed as a cause of death on an autopsy, and that would be in the case of an immediate anaphylaxis reaction, so a severe allergic reaction, where the person dies almost instantaneously after being inoculated. And since that's not what happened, they're not going to rule this cause of death vaccine. He says, short of that, it would be difficult for us to definitively say that this is the vaccine, adding that it would be more likely that they would have a lack of answers or an incomplete autopsy. He said, just about every vaccine or everything you do to treat someone when you inject something has a potential for a negative outcome. And that's the other thing to consider. Statistically, like they said, it is likely that you will see some people die after getting this vaccine. If the CDC says 92 million doses have been given out, and even if you say there's multiple doses per person, fine, cut it in half and say there's 45 million people that have been dosed. Only 1,600 people died. That's an incredibly insignificant number when you consider how many people we're really talking about. I know it's significant to the 9-year-old. I know it's significant to the family of Cassidy Curl. But I don't even know that this is necessarily vaccine related. And I say that, again, not as a medical doctor, but as a person who has Google and can find out from the Mayo Clinic what acute liver failure is. You listen to this and tell me if this sounds a lot more like what happened. Acute liver failure is loss of liver function that occurs rapidly in days or weeks, usually a person who has no pre-existing liver disease. It's most commonly caused by hepatitis virus or drugs, such as acetaminophen. So if she wasn't feeling very well and she took a bunch of Tylenol, acute liver failure is less common than chronic liver failure, which develops more slowly. Acute liver failure, also known as fulminant hepatic failure, can cause serious complications, including excessive bleeding and increasing pressure in the brain. It's a medical emergency that requires hospitalization. Depending on the cause, acute liver failure is sometimes reversed with treatment. In many situations, though, a liver transplant would be the only cure. Okay, so that is what happens when your liver just shuts down. There's not much to do except for to transplant. And like they said, they were trying to get her stable for a transplant when she died. They could not get her to stabilize. So then you ask, well, how often do people die if they get acute liver failure? And this says, before the introduction of a new life-saving thing, fulminant hepatic failure, mortality was generally greater than 80%. So in other words, when you have this happen, likely you're gonna die. Because of some new life-saving changes in medicine that they've made, it's got an approximate survival rate of now 60%. So it's gotten better because they're able to do transplants. But if you can't get a transplant, you're likely not going to survive. This says the etiological factor and the development of complications are the main determinants of the outcome in acute liver failure. Patients with acute liver failure caused by acetaminophen have a better prognosis than those with an indeterminate form of the disorder. So if they don't know what's causing the acute liver failure, likely if you can't get a transplant, you will die. And I have to look at that and say, I can't imagine that that is entirely related to the vaccine. Now you say, well, how many people in the US have this? Acute liver failure is a rare clinical syndrome with annual incidence of less than 10 cases per million in the developed world. In the United States, approximately 2,000 cases of ALF are diagnosed each year. Holy smokes. So 2,000 cases in the United States per year, and roughly 80% of them die. So 1,600 people die of acute liver failure a year. We have 1,600 people dead after taking the vaccine. Do you see why I am not ready yet to jump on board and say this vaccine is killing everyone that gets it and that it's a secret thing to... Look, I believe this vaccine is probably more likely to sterilize people long term than it is to try to secretly kill off some people. I understand that vaccines will statistically have people die after they are taken, because people also die after not having taken vaccines. It is not a butterfly effect that causes every death. And so my encouragement is, when you see these headlines saying another person died after taking the vaccine, read it from every source you can find and look at their biases, and then look and say, what's the one thing they're not talking about, which may likely be the reason this person's deceased. Now again, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not saying that this person died from acute liver failure. I am saying that when I read what it is and I read how she died, it looks a lot more like acute liver failure, and until they can tell you what it was brought on by, I'm not willing to say that it was the vaccine. It looks, as the doctor even put it, like even if you made that claim, you could never prove it. So I'm not going to make that claim. And I would encourage anyone who is watching this, if you want to be taken seriously and seen as being credible, you can't make claims like this vaccine is killing people, because it's just not so. It's not killing everyone that takes it. And the acute liver failure has killed as many people this year as this vaccine. So that's what I had to say. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like this video, share it with someone you know, and do everything else that you can do to keep America afloat.